live in just a moment, so give it a few seconds and then you can get underway.
Lovely, thank you.
Ready when you are.
Right, okay, lovely, thank you. Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the Primary Care Commissioning Committee. Running up to a bank holiday, I think we're all in quite good spirits. We're hoping that our technology works better than this morning. Apparently it is this afternoon now. So we'll see how we get on with that. I've actually got some apologies. I know, Michelle, you've got a few as well. I've got an apology from Sean Macy, apology from Paula Evans, Health Watch York, and an apology from Chris
Clark and Abby Coombs.
Yeah, Abby's on leave, and I said that was absolutely fine, and either Steph or I will jump in with the reports. We've both spoken to her. If we go straight to the minutes, please, and I'm hoping that you've all read them, and I believe they're a true and accurate record. I just want to make sure that everyone else agrees with me. Yeah, nods and thumbs up. Yeah, super, that's lovely. Thank you all. And from there, if we go to the matters arising, and Steph, there's only the medicines management stuff that I'd just like to sort of highlight, and if you maybe got a little update there, that would be wonderful.
Sorry, it's taking a bit of time for the mute to come off. Yes, we're working through that. We've been aligning our activity with North Yorkshire, and there's a joint medicines management committee, as there always has been, and that's running. Is there anything more you want me to say?
No, that's lovely. As long as we're clear, it's in. And I'm mindful that the day is a little bit skewed. I don't know whether maybe we need to think about changing the date, if that's okay, Steph.
Okay.
Yeah, lovely. That's brilliant. So swiftly moving on, if you remember, we had the review of this committee. Abby isn't here to deliver it, but her and I have had a conversation. If I smile and say it was colourful, I'm not quite sure what it does say. There was one column that if somebody would like to discuss that column with me, I'm very open to having that discussion. But Abby and I are going to take a really good look at that and QPEC results. And what we'll do is we'll come back to you and we'll think about the findings. Myself, I'm not sure that it worked very well for the committees, and maybe it should have been more a verbal conversation and a team effort about how we go forward. So if everybody's okay with that, I think if we park that for now and you allow Abby and myself and potentially anybody who would like to contact me further to contact me. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, everyone. Thank you. It's over to you, Simon, please, for the financial update.
Thanks, Julie. Nothing much to update at month 2 in terms of the current year. In about a week's time, we'll be working out what the month 2 position is once we've closed the ledgers. Useful for the committee to note that last year we got the CCG to a break-even position. Annual accounts were produced on that basis. Those are nearly concluded with external audit. The audit committee will meet to discuss those finally tomorrow. But otherwise for this year, there's risks emerging as they always do, particularly with regard to nationally determined pots of money like the hospital discharge fund, the elective recovery fund, As regards primary care, the additional roles is the largest single reimbursement item, which is of note. But there's nothing that we think at this point, bearing in mind we've only set the plan for half a year, there's nothing at this point that would dissuade us from thinking that we'll achieve break even in line with the plan that we submitted a few weeks ago.
Lovely, thank you, Simon. And any comments, questions for Simon, please? Nope. Okay, moving on. It's over to you, Steph, please, next.
Thank you. I'm just going to introduce this item with a couple of heartfelt thanks. So Fiona and Gary are going to do a presentation around the richness of the engagement with primary care over the last year. You've all had the report. I hope in reading it, you just reflect that that's a snapshot of all the hard work that primary care have delivered in the pandemic. The coordinator and the author of the report, Sean, isn't here, but I would like the notes to reflect the work. But in true Sean style, his parting comments to me this morning were, please can you make sure that the primary care committee actually acknowledge our thanks that our primary care colleagues responded to the survey on time and in a level of detail that reflected that work. So I'm going to hand over to colleagues, but really in the context of thanking everybody who's been involved in producing that end of year report in what has been a truly exceptional year.
Thanks, Steph. I'll pick up from here. Fee and I are going to try a double act, and some of that's going to include sharing our screen. So we're just going to see how that goes. I wanted to just kind of put a kind of a top and tail over the report, really. Broadly, I think the PCNs, the 8 PCNs across the Vale of York, performed extraordinarily over the last 12 months. All of health and care did, but my focus, Fiona's focus, is particularly on our PCNs, and I think being close to them, we saw just how much they achieved. And I think it's just worth reminding that the aim of primary care networks, and actually supported by the COVID funding over the last year, has been to support primary care resilience, support practices to focus on the needs of their populations, especially vulnerable groups, to achieve all this by working together better, including integrating with a range of health and care providers, including the voluntary sector. It's quite a variation on traditional general practice as we might have considered it just 2 years ago. And I think the report just highlights how successful PCNs have been in achieving these aims, including expanding and developing the primary care workforce, supporting those vulnerable patients, including health checks for patients with learning difficulties, and also working hard in the background, the non-clinical side, to improve their management and governance that's enabled their clinical leaders to take a greater role leading across the system, and working outside the practice to bring partners together. In context, just those additional roles was £2.34 million, a wide range of new roles introduced into general practice. If you think of that in any other context, introducing that many new people, that many new roles into an established business would be really challenging. And I think primary care rose to that really well. I think the vaccination programme across the Vale of York has been a huge success. And when Fee and I do some of our kind of, we're going to do some screen sharing and show you some highlights. I think the numbers speak for themselves. And I think the GP Forward View and organisational development monies that were approved by Primary Care Commission and Committee to support PCNs, improve their winter resilience, has been really warmly welcomed. The second wave, the second lockdown, meant that not every plan was delivered to the letter of the plan, but they were all fully delivered, and all PCNs had to adjust to make best use of that funding. The consequence of that was that all of our practices remained resilient throughout the winter, which meant they could continue to offer effective care for their patients and start the vaccination programme. I'm going to move on to a few central highlights. So I'm going to try sharing my screen. I'm just going to see how this goes. It may or may not work. If I try that. Can you see something that says York Central in numbers?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to read through the whole lot because there can't be anything worse than people who read an entire PowerPoint presentation to you. But I'm going to pick out 4 bits that I think shows how the PCNs in Central York have been open for business, have been caring, effective, and to highlight the maturity that they've achieved over the last 2 years. So starting with open, across the whole of the Vale of York, so this isn't just York Central. In March, there were 167,000 GP appointments. It's huge. So despite the press, despite the public perception that general practice is closed, it hasn't been and it isn't. To context that, that's about 7,700 GP appointments per working day across the Vale of York. It's a huge number compared to any other provider. Estimate about 10% more appointments in total delivered now than there was pre-pandemic, and we're about 90% of the face-to-face level of GP appointments that we were pre-pandemic. So quite significant numbers, and not necessarily what we're hearing in the public sentiment or in the press. I think in terms of caring, Central opening the COVID spa in the first wave to support patients at high risk of rapid decline. And then in the second wave, bringing in a working relationship with City of York Council to bring in health trainers to support patients post-COVID has been brilliant, really. In terms of effective, the vaccination centre, the mass vaccination centre at Askham Bar, run by Nimbus, has just been outstanding. They estimate 1 in every 250 vaccinations given nationally is being delivered at that site, and at the last count, it was coming up to about 200,000 vaccinations given at that site. Outstanding. And I think in terms of mature, I think all the GP practices through their PCNs have worked really effectively and increasingly effectively over the last 2 years together. They've all come together through Nimbus, which has created the voice of Central GPs at York as a place, and also through Nimbus. I think they are kind of realising the NHS England model for primary care at multiple levels, including creating that Central York PCN voice at ICS. And I think that open, caring, effective and mature is all I really want to say about Central. And I'll hand to Fee. I've just got to figure out how to unshare my screen now. Oh, this is difficult, isn't it?
So I'll just start introduction while Gary's helping with the technology. So in terms of the Vale part of the Vale of York, colleagues will remember we've got 3 primary care networks working in really distinct communities across a very, very wide geography. So there are 3 separate slides that reflect the diversity of the PCNs working on that footprint, which you'll see hopefully in a minute. Are you opening the Shah slide, the Southam and Rydale slide, Gary? Oh, it appeared and disappeared fleetingly. Yes, I'll start with Southam and Rydale. I think the key bit. No.
I'll share my screen again. I am struggling with the technology, as you can probably gather.
That's fine. I'll talk anyway. The 3 distinct geographies across the Vale primary care networks means that sometimes collaboration is difficult because of the really huge distances that we're working across. But what the Vale PCNs have done really impressively is work together on a Vale footprint wherever that's been possible. So we now have a Vale-wide partnership meeting that meets every month with our district council colleagues, our 3 district councils, our county council, our mental health and acute providers, community providers, and we've got a really strong representation now through the voluntary sector. And if I'm picking picking out some highlights, particularly for South Hambleton and Rydale, it's been the enormous amount of extra time and effort they've put around inequalities, and particularly working on supporting some of our more vulnerable patient groups, particularly those with learning difficulties or serious mental illness. And they've done some really impressive work using their care coordinators and their social prescribing link workers to help provide extra support for that. So they've delivered over 80% of the health checks for their populations with, over 82% of their population with learning difficulties have now had the full set of health checks delivered, which I think in this current climate of people being anxious about attending appointments and also the pressure on primary care to make the time required, I think that's a really impressive statistic. They've done a lot of patient engagement this year, so examples include developing and sustaining a new service for Parkinson's disease support with a community nurse, which CCG recently approved as a long-term commitment, which I think is a really great example of delivering care close to where people live and recognising the different needs in those rural localities. They've worked vaccination-wise on 2 sites, one in Easingwold and one in Pickering, and huge reliance and huge thanks to our voluntary sector colleagues and the absolutely tons of volunteers who help support those vaccination sites in those rural communities. We couldn't have done that without them. And they've delivered over a 94% COVID vaccination rate. I think I've mentioned the learning disability and serious mental illness support that they've delivered, but they've also included a whole range of extra roles, including physiotherapy, first contact practitioners, pharmacy technicians. So really nice examples, as all the PCNs have got across the Vale of York, about enhancing their current workforce and starting to deliver enhanced services for patients. Can I have the next one, Gary, if you're able to? So I'm looking over my shoulder because Gary's on the bench behind me. Selby Town and Tadcaster and Rural are our 2 other key PCNs in the Vale. And again, where possible, we're trying to work on a Selby district footprint, which recognises the partnerships that we've got with Selby District Council colleagues and also North Yorkshire County Council. So in Selby Town, 50,000 population with 4 key practices delivering there. Really significant work for the primary care network in Selby around developing some of the partnerships. So we've now got a Selby district partnership meeting with senior colleagues from all of our key partners, and we're currently working on a 10-year vision for the Selby district with some very clear ambitions around working towards a healthier, a more equal and a more resilient Selby. And you can see some of the priorities in the top left-hand corner that the Selby district partnership is starting to look at. As with South Hambleton and Rydale, support for our vulnerable groups has been a particular focus, and really impressive. 100% of the people on our learning disability register have now received their COVID vaccinations in that Selby district. Over 41,000 vaccinations delivered, and as in the other bits of the patch, huge amount of work around engaging with our communities. So we've got big work streams called Hearing Selby Voices, where we've been doing a whole load of engagement groups with the people who live and work in Selby, understanding what matters to them, what's important to them, and looking at that alongside a real focus on population health needs. So we know in Selby, for example, two of our areas of Selby are in the top 10% most deprived in the country. So we're really trying to tailor what's delivered through the primary care networks to specific elements of the district. And you can see some examples on the slide of the kind of work they've been starting to deliver. And then last but not least, Tadcaster and Rural, Selby PCN, which is our smallest PCN, so only around 29,000 population, but working across 3 practice sites. Similar challenges of some of the patients happy to travel to York, some happy to travel to Selby, but for some of our fairer areas, it's a long way to access some of those services. So a key focus again on trying to deliver things as close to the communities as we possibly can. And certainly in Tadcaster and Rural, they've had a particular focus on social prescribing link worker services and on care coordination. So trying to deliver programmes of support through the health and wellbeing coaches for up to 12 weeks at a time with particular groups of the population that they feel would benefit from extra support. And again, huge effort in terms of some of the COVID response and the vaccination sites at Tadcaster and at the airfield in Sherburn. So you can see from those slides, and we'll make those available for people to look at outside of the meeting, so you can digest some of the content in there. But you can see that on top of the day-to-day primary care pressures that Gary's outlined, the PCNs have absolutely moved on leaps and bounds in only their second year of being organisations together, and that collaboration across a practice footprint, that enhancing primary care support through the additional roles that Gary's mentioned. Over 2.3 million investment in extra posts. And I think you can see from the report just how much impact that's had. So I guess in summary from me before I hand back to Gary, we asked Primary Care Commissioning Committee over a year ago to agree the release of the various forms of funding through the GP Forward View and the organisational development money. And we agreed a light touch on assurance, recognising the huge pressure that primary care and particularly the clinical directors are under, because they're juggling all of these extra achievements on half a day or a day a week. So huge pressure on people's time to still continue the transformation while they're also doing the day job. I hope what you'll have seen in this report is it has been a tough year for everybody, but the collaboration between the primary care networks and the wider partners has been really impressive this year. And I think the strength of the relationships across the patch is just really impressive in terms of working together on shared problems, shared challenges that other partners have, and PCNs have been a real linchpin in trying to pull together some of that partnership working. So I think whilst we've got many challenges remaining, I hope that PCCC will recognise the achievements that the networks have delivered this year and really applaud the significant progress that's been made, and recognise the huge number of extra services that have been put in place over this last year. So I think there's a lot to be proud of in terms of primary care, and particularly the primary care networks and their collaboration. And finally from me, just a huge thanks to the amazing Ryan, who's on the call, who spent many hours putting those slides together for us this week, Ryan. So thank you, they look fabulous.
Yeah, and very short and sweet closing from me. I think the PCNs have done great, but I think it's a really challenging year ahead. And I think the PCNs have appreciated the support of Primary Care Commissioning Committee, and I think they will continue to appreciate that support. The challenges in the year ahead, COVID recovery and system change, for the clinical directors, as Fee said, on half a day or a day a week, is a lot. And I think we should remain focused on supporting general practice and our PCNs to remain resilient, keep them focused on the needs of their population, and continue growing them and helping them to mature into that leadership role, that system leadership role that's expected of them. And I'll close at that. Thank you.
Well, can I add my huge thanks and say your smiles are well and well deserved. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ryan, for the slides. They were very, very interesting and a bit different. So very colourful and bright, with so much information on. Thank you. We do sometimes see things that are hard to understand. And they weren't. Any questions or comments from the rest of the group? David?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just an example of the things that can be achieved if you let people who know what they're doing get on with it. This hasn't been something that's been, with respect to NHS England, this hasn't been something that's been led from the top and dictated from the top. This is something that's happened that people who know what they're doing have worked together with great achievement. So all we can do is echo those thanks, really, and to everybody involved. Staff at all GPs, not just the GPs, but all their receptionists and the support workers and other clinicians. It's been remarkable, and it's started by ordinary people, really, and it's become a major influence in the country. So let any politician have a go at the NHS now, and they'll be in some difficulties.
Perfectly put. Thank you, David. Any more comments? Tim, have you anything from your point of view to add to us?
Yes, thank you, Julie. think very carefully how to word this, because probably more of an observation than anything else, and it's not really. I'm not really wanting an answer, but just to give you a feel of what it feels like on the front line at the moment. So, last Thursday, totally unprompted, NHS England sent out a letter that was picked up by the press. So I'm presuming most of you are aware of what I'm talking about. Basically stating that GPs had to get back to doing face-to-face appointments by Monday. No warning, no acknowledgement of the fact that the vast majority of practices, which is borne out by Gary's and Fiona's presentation, have never stopped doing face-to-face appointments and are actually doing more work, more intensity of work than we were doing pre-COVID. We could have done with some more public local support, if I'm absolutely honest. I was looking at all the social media, the standard media. It was noticeable by its absence that our local commissioners and NHS England, I didn't see anything that specifically said that this wasn't the reality in York. So either that was because you weren't allowed to say anything, it got missed, or actually you believe that the NHS statement was the truth and that we aren't doing what we're doing. Now, I'm pretty sure it wasn't the last one, but it did feel a very bleak week last week, and it's been a small minority, but all of my staff have experienced verbal abuse this week, both on the phones and some of them at the front desk, demanding face-to-face appointments after that letter because there was no sort of explanation on that. You know, yesterday's news, tomorrow's chip wrappers. We know what the reality is with what we're working with. But I suppose, and you know, Mike Holmes has been excellent on local media. There's been some good stuff. But I suppose if we are all truly standing together to do the best we can in this area, then, you know, we perhaps could have done with something to say that this isn't the case locally. I'm sure there are practices who've shut the doors, and we've all heard anecdotes, but it seems a shame that we all got tarred with the same brush. And it was a bit of a kick in the teeth. And it's not, I know I've had personal support from people on this call, and, you know, that's been really valued. But I suppose it's our frontline staff as much as anything, the receptionists who get the grief. You know, everybody felt a little bit abandoned last Monday. Now, I'm sure that it will pick up, and like I say, as we move back to normality, it'll be forgotten. But that extra demand and that extra little weapon of you have to see me face to face if I want to be seen face to face is now out there. And it's been very challenging. Yeah. We'd need a waiting room the size of a football field if we were going to get everybody in who wanted to be seen face to face, like we used to do in the old days. We'd get 70, 80 people in our waiting room, 2 meter spacing. You just can't do it. So, you know, we're hamstrung, even if we did just want to go back to the old system, which I think all of us realise that the telephone support that we're offering actually means more people, and we're showing that 20% more people are being dealt with than before the pandemic, and that's mainly due to the increase in capacity that the new ways of working have given us. So, you know, that I think that report sums up very well what's been going on, and I am really grateful for all the support on this call. But going forward over what's going to be very difficult for the all organisations, you know, if we can start to get some of that public positive message out there, be really appreciated. And the final thing is, I'm just a little bit concerned about how we keep that going past next year. It's a long way away, but I'm not sure in my own head how the ICSs are going to fit in to provide this role that this committee provides now. And I would hate for that to get lost. I would hate for primary care to get lost, because this is such a good forum to take primary care on its own. And there aren't many forums like that where it doesn't get swallowed up by the bigger system. I'll leave it there. That was more than I wanted to say. But just, and I hope everybody takes that in the spirit it was meant.
Absolutely. I just want to thank you for your honesty, Tim. And prior to the face-to-face announcement, I probably had the same conversation several times with people in your position. And I apologise wholeheartedly as a member of the public. And I really want to know what we can do. And Stephanie had her hand up, so I'm hoping she's got some amazing stuff to share.
So I just want to reflect some of the things that Tim said, but not in the sense that it's a negative, because actually I value the honesty and openness in this forum. So Tim will have, and colleagues will have seen the LMC letter, which identified that the CCG had no forward notice of that letter. And actually we have been working on a media campaign. We've met with Councillor Carol Runciman, and we're going to look at two approaches. One around ramping up the response and the accuracy of some of the reporting around the negative narrative, and I'm not even going to repeat the phrase. Also the narrative with other health partners that jump on that bandwagon, which is singularly unhelpful. And so there's a bit of a momentum to build on that. So we have done some social media to counteract that. And I know the LMC wrote to practices, and I also wrote to practices and practice managers, conveying our support and our disappointment. So we have been gathering real life front of house experiences, positive and negative, and we will start to have that mature and difficult conversation with the public around the fact that the way in which people access primary care will never go back to how it was pre-pandemic. It simply won't. There are lessons for us to learn. We do want to hear the stories of our residents and of our patients, but we have to move forward on having that mature conversation. And again, not in a negative space. We have delivered more activity in this pandemic year than the same time pre-pandemic. And in and around that activity, our practices are still at a 2.5 DNA rate, where patients fail to attend for an appointment. So there's always going to be legitimate reasons why people don't attend an appointment. But we have to have a conversation about the breadth and range of places that people can access appropriate care for themselves, including pharmacies. So that was mainly in support of you, Tim, and also just to put that into context with hopefully what the CCG can do. But I absolutely do not want that narrative to distract from you know, the themes within the report and the presentation, which actually says, my word, you've done a good job. You know, let's celebrate that.
Sorry, Julie, can I come in? Because I've had to drop off the meeting about 3 times now.
Oh, yes, sorry,
connection
yes,
problems, and I haven't got a hand raise function. So I'm going to leave my video off, just not use any bandwidth. I think just, I picked up obviously what Tim was saying about the letter, and I don't think anyone locally in NHS England were comfortable at all that the letter had gone out. Obviously, NHS England isn't the most agile organisation, so we couldn't really, to my knowledge, put any local comms of support out, although we'd have liked to. But I know that me and my colleagues didn't agree with the letter, any of it, and I didn't include it in my NHS England update for this report, because I didn't want a report with my name on it linked to the letter either. So we do support you, just appreciate that it maybe didn't feel like it, but we completely understand the pressures you're under.
Thank you, David. Any more comments? Andrew.
Hello. Hi, thanks. Yeah, it's just to come in on what everybody else has said really so far. So it's interesting that you sit here and look at the kind of data that you've just presented, and I think it was a great presentation. But I was just sat here thinking, much like Tim, really, that I think this is the reason why that letter was such a sort of slap in the face, really, on the back of all of that. And I know that CCG and everyone on this call has been hugely supportive, and the conversations I've had with Steph, Fiona, Gary have been great, and I've never for a second thought that there wasn't anything other than support from everybody here. And I also know that the CCG weren't aware of the letter, and it sounds like even more local NHS England employees weren't aware either. The follow-up letter from NHS England was also very poor and wasn't much better than the first one. So it doesn't seem like any lessons have been learned at all by NHS England. I have seen some things in the media, Tim. I think there have been some stuff from the CCG, and I know that communication to practices was well received. So I guess the only thing I would add is that I think, like Tim says, I know what I've just said, and Tim knows it. I'm not sure that even potentially the less politically clued up kind of salaried GPs know that message that you've talked about today. I certainly don't think it's filtered through to the frontline non-clinical staff in practices. I think that if you went and asked the average receptionist, they'd probably think that that face-to-face is an order, that is an order, and patients have a right to demand it. And I just think that what Sharon has said in the comments used the word charm offensive. I just wonder now, with all of that data that you've got there, that is great, and remember it's on top of like normal business as usual. I just wonder what's holding us back from just going for it with this now, to just push that message wholeheartedly out there that there's nothing in this. But I do really appreciate the support we've had. I think it's been great.
I know Steph will want to respond to that, Andrew. And I think a lot of what I was put my hand up to say, I think you covered. And I think that it surprised us all. So it come out Thursday night. Could we put comms out Friday morning? No, can never be that quick, not that reactive. Didn't expect it. That was half the problem. Didn't have anything prepared. But we have been doing a lot of work. And, we've been talking to practice managers. We've been talking to receptionists. We're very cognizant of how much grief that frontline receptionist is taking. And I think the examples that Tim gave, I've heard from virtually every practice I've spoken to as a direct result of that letter. The other interesting bit, so you might not have seen much going out in comms, but Sean Macy and myself were with Sharon Hegarty last night talking about how we pull this together now and how we get it out and how we change some of the messages around demand as well, and hold the mirror up to patients to take some responsibility. One face-to-face appointment is probably 3 or 4 in total triage. Do you really need to demand a face-to-face appointment, or can you let your clinician determine that? There's some responsibility on the public here. They can't just have everything that they want. And the other interesting piece of work, and it's been a bit softer and less visible, but is the work that we've been doing within health more broadly. So if you're not a GP, you might be a consultant surgeon, you might be a manager in a hospital trust. You might also, as a member of the public, kind of believe that general practice hasn't been open for face-to-face appointments. So there's been quite a lot of soft work around that. And one of the most overwhelming bits of feedback that I've had from frontline elsewhere across the system is this issue of face-to-face appointments is shared across all health providers. PPE, infection prevention control, social distancing. You wouldn't want to relax them in any health setting, so why would you want to relax it in the general practice? So I think there's a lot of clinical empathy across the local system with general practice on this as well. So I just wanted to put that in so that you knew it. I don't know, Steph, whether you want to add anything to that?
No, I think we've heard that message loud and clear, and we've got plans, and I think what I'm hearing is we need to accelerate them, and we actually need to get a level of visibility that perhaps we hadn't felt was missing, but I hear and acknowledge what people are saying.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions?
Yeah, I do. Just very quickly come back and thank everybody for their positive words there. It is much appreciated. I understand. I suppose I'm getting old, and what I'm starting to realise is the medium moves so much more quickly than it used to back in the day. Things are very much sort of instant. Twitter, you know, is love it or hate it. I can't leave it alone some days, which I could, because it was fascinating yesterday, for example, for different reasons. You know, very much appreciated. I think the other thing I'd like to say is we know we've not been perfect. We know that general practice, like every organisation, has got learning to do, and we're seeing those cases, and we feel everyone. You know, every time we feel we've let someone down, we do a case review. We're going to have more of those to do this year because it was just such a new way of working that we all had to adjust to. We value the data from the other point of view as well, when the CCG are able to help us benchmark ourselves and pull ourselves up to the high standards that the practices offer locally. So we're not saying we want the message to be that everything is absolutely fine. As Gary said, and Fiona put in the report, you know, primary care is under pressure, and we are going to need support through that. And we do value that critical friend sort of role that CCG has always had. But yeah, let's make this positive. Let's build the positives out of all this. Let's have a strategy where we can shut down misinformation quickly, but have the local debate about what matters to local people. It doesn't matter to local people what the access to GP is like in London, but it does matter what it's like in Acomb. And that's where we have to make sure we keep the conversation. So thank you for that. Sorry, that probably was a bit more than I intended, and onward and upward. Thanks very much.
I just think, and I think we all agree, that's unbelievably invaluable, and it's why we're here. And I really value your honesty as always. Thank you, everybody. It's clear that we've got a lot of work to do going forward. I know we've begun a lot of it, but it just shows how easy one person's anger and negativity on a call can impact on somebody else. So you know, when you ring your receptionist, please remember that she's a person, and you know, don't be rude, don't be cruel. You wouldn't do it to her face. Phil.
I know Tim doesn't want to perpetuate this, but there's another point beyond the immediate for me. My reading some time ago, the NHS plan puts primary care practitioners very much more in the front line about being the ultimate triage service to protect the rest of the NHS. That's hardwired into the NHS plan. So, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic was a very early, very stern test of that. I'd like to know, I don't know if Phil's still on the call or not. I'd like to know if the well-being and welfare and resilience of our primary care colleagues is on the ICS's radar going forward, because if primary care clinical colleagues are going to play this critical role on behalf of the rest of the NHS, the big message that comes out of the work that we have under this item is not only the fantastic delivery from our primary care colleagues and their teams, but also the rise inexorably of demand going forward. So if this is a challenge, it's not just a challenge now, it's going to be a challenge for the foreseeable future. So I'd like to know what's being done around the welfare, well-being and resilience of primary care at a system level. Thanks.
Phil, any comments for us?
Yeah, really good question and challenge. I would say early days. At an ICS system level, there's certainly a recognition of the contribution that primary care has made, and importantly will continue to make. But in part because of the geography of Humber Coast and Vale and its differential and its spread, it's not straightforward to construct an approach that will be meaningful and effective that responds to what you've just asked, Phil. So I think it's coming, but not straightforward. So what does that mean? Therefore, in North Yorkshire and York, in particular with colleagues from the LMC, it's very much for us to have an eye to what we can do with that locally on behalf of the ICS, while the ICS is thinking about that geographical challenge. And so the work that Steph's outlined, Brian McGregor, who many of you will know, on behalf of the LMC, Brian was involved in that discussion and was contributing to what Steph has described, will continue to do so, and was supportive of what we were proposing to do. I think what Tim has said is get on with it. So, and Steph said, "Yeah, heard that. We will." So I think that's where things are. Julie, is my own reading of things. Thank you. And just while I'm on a personal level, I can relate to what Tim has described. I've known quite a lot of the GPs. I've come to know many of the GPs across the Vale of York reasonably well over the last 3 to 4 years. I'm immensely impressed with the part that they and their practices have played. But it's easy for me to just say that, and it not necessarily to be believed by members of the public. But when I hear the tremble in the voice, when I see the change in the body language, when I see the emotion of the contributions from those GPs who I've worked with over a few years now, that hits home, because I know these guys well enough to know when it's real and it matters, and it's hurting them on a personal level, as well as making it difficult for them on a professional level. And that was part of the discussion we had in the meeting that Steph described. So yeah, getting on with it and doing it quickly and making it meaningful is really really important. And if we can do that, then we sort of owe it to some of our GP colleagues, because in the CCG we think we've had it pretty hard, but they've had it harder than we have. So we should do everything we can to help, really.
Thank you, Philia. I think several of us have had those conversations with our colleagues and the honesty of our colleagues here at this group. And I just want to ensure that we get that message to the whole of the PCN teams, from the directors to the doctors, to the staff, to the ancillary staff that enable the staff to work, that they get the message that how valued they are. And how we recognise what they've done and what they've achieved during this horrendous time, and to think that they are still outstripping figures from previous years is absolutely unimaginable. But they've done it because they've worked differently, and they've worked together, and they've worked tirelessly. And we don't want to let them down. A bit later on, we'll talk a little bit more about protecting our primary care colleagues. So maybe we might get some volunteers to come on that group. That's a little preempt to get you involved later on. But thank you so much, Gary, Steph, and Fiona for this presentation. It's inspirational to read it, and thank you for everybody that we've actually talked about that actually is part of what's happening and the stuff that we're reporting. And it's good for me to hear the voluntary sector are supporting our wonderful NHS in such an imaginative way. And I know that they rallied pretty quickly and pretty hard and pretty fiercely. And we are a team, and that is going forward, all areas. You know, Sharon, I'm sure that that your teams have been working their socks off as well to enable us to achieve the things that we've been doing. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for the discussion. I guess if we move swiftly on, it's back to you, Steph, please, for a coronavirus update.
Okay, so Sharon may want to add, but infection rates are mercifully low. I'll just touch upon the vaccination programme. So of a total of 303,000 residents in our Vale of York population, we've got a headline 69% first vaccination rate. So that means that you know, we're over 200,000, almost 210,000 people who've had their first vaccines, and actually we're running up behind that pretty quickly with second dose vaccinations, which is almost 132,000. So in our Vale population, Fiona referenced really very high levels of vaccination rates of our older residents. Our focus around 1 to 9, so they're 50s and upwards, and that reflects the population. When we bring the populations together of the city and the Vale, the numbers come down slightly because we've got a very young population in the city, particularly our student population, and at the moment we are vaccinating over 30s. Still a really good vaccination rate. So a couple of the highlights around the vaccination programme. We've been working with our local authority colleagues to really understand the data of take-up rates. So we've done some work around why people, where there might be barriers. You've heard me talk about that before. So we've been doing and testing out some additional things. So late night clinics, now we're in the working age cohorts. We've noticed that that population group want weekends and evenings, so we've put more resource into the evenings. We're starting to look at and very clearly sort of develop a governance structure for workplace vaccination programs. We've got additional pharmacies coming on stream in a dispersed model. So the next one coming on stream will be in Acomb. And I want to just really kind of highlight the work of the contact tracers from the City of York Council. So all our practices offer the vaccine to anybody who's eligible through a variety of routes, writing, ringing, texting them. But you've heard me say that the vaccine's not mandatory, but actually we want to understand them, and we want to address some of the reasons people are telling us that they are not taking a vaccine. And so part of the work that we're doing with the contact tracers is to then take a smaller group by practice of those people who haven't taken a vaccine up. So the contact tracers are ringing those individuals, and they have a much longer, fuller conversation with them, and that is converting some of those conversations into additional vaccines. You've heard me say it's an evergreen offer. Anybody who is listening to this live stream, if you are eligible for a vaccine, you are eligible for a vaccine. It isn't that we called you in January and now you're not eligible. Please contact the CCG and we will facilitate you having a vaccine. It's really important to stress that we have an open offer to any eligible person. So our numbers are really good. We know that that is contributing to lower infection rates, and we certainly know that it's released the burden on our hospital colleagues, so that we can actually start to restore services and look to address our backlog. So I'll leave it there. It's for me, it's another positive story. Our practices, our voluntary sector, retired clinical people, they've all pulled together, and they continue to pull together on the vaccine programme, and it is another area of which we are immensely proud of our shared workforce who've delivered such a phenomenal result.
Okay, David, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, before we look at the big question, really, isn't it? Is it's crystal ball time. What's going to happen over the summer and into the winter? What's the current, public health and NHS view on what's going to happen in relation to the pandemic over coming months?
Shall I yeah, thanks, Julie. It's a very good question, David, and we're doing some work at the moment across the York system, and I think North Yorkshire are doing similar work, and to try and come up with a best and worst case scenario of what we think might happen heading into winter. What we know at the moment across North Yorkshire and York, as Steph has already said, our case numbers are low at the moment. They're higher than they were last summer, but they're still low, not the lowest in the country, but certainly lower than the rest of the region, and we're in quite a good position. Haven't had any care home outbreaks for quite some time now. And as Steph has said, the vaccination programme is going very well. So provided we're able to maintain a high uptake of vaccinations, we should be in quite a good position heading into winter. What we are keeping a close eye on is any variants of concern, or VOX, as they're affectionately called. We've seen, in the media what's happening in other parts of the country. Kirklees, Bedford, Bolton, some of those other areas where they have seen high levels of the variant first found in India, the B1167.2 variant. At the moment, across North Yorkshire and York, we're seeing very low levels of variants. All viruses mutate, we know that. The variants of concern are really those that have been identified by Public Health England, where they're thought to either be more infectious or to spread more easily. We know we've got the Kent variant that is already circulating widely and has been across North Yorkshire and York since kind of the end of December, beginning of January. And so, 100% of our cases were caused by the Kent variant. We're starting to see very small numbers of the South African and Indian variant coming through. But because of the testing that we're doing, we are picking those cases up quite quickly. North Yorkshire was testing its surge capacity plan yesterday, I believe, or it might have been earlier this week. I think the learning exercise was yesterday. We have a plan in place to be able to respond very quickly to any outbreaks in York as well. So we're as prepared as we can be. I think the uncertainty is what might happen with non-COVID respiratory illnesses. So we know that the winter we've just had, there were very low levels of flu, low levels of other respiratory illnesses, and we really didn't see much norovirus either. So some of the uncertainty is what might happen with non-COVID illnesses, and whether they'll come back in strength, having not been circulating through this last winter. So there are some uncertainties, but we're getting all of our plans in place. So we'll be prepared as a system, as a health and social care system, for whatever winter throws at us. And we've got the systems in place, the early warning systems in place to be able to highlight where there are emerging problems. And through the pandemic, I think our communications across agencies have improved, our working together is improved. So we're going to be in a very good position to be able to respond very, very quickly. And so it is a concern, David, but I think we'll be prepared to be able to respond to whatever happens, really.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Steph, did you have anything else to add? Can I ask a question then on the back of that, really? The flu vaccine is imperative, but we're hearing in the press that potentially we're not going to know exactly what we're going to be dealing with, and I sort of think what's the message that we need to get out there to people to reassure them?
In terms of supply, Julie?
Well, in terms of actually developing a vaccine that's appropriate for this year, I know it's going to be really, really difficult, and I just sort of wondered what we can share, what we know.
So in any 1 year, practices will engage with NHS England, who and Public Health England, who commission the flu vaccination programme. Some practices, we've already been engaged in purchasing and ordering flu vaccines from February onward. So that dialogue has already commenced. And also practices are already thinking and planning for the flu vaccination programme, and indeed any booster programme. So I think, as Sharon is indicating around all of those things that we are scenario planning, that we have thought that through, and we can flex, and I think of all the things that practices have demonstrated, their agility to respond when they are given some notice, and supplies that they will deliver the flu vaccine programme, because if you recall, it seems a long time ago and it's back in our memories, actually we expanded the eligibility criteria for flu vaccines. So running alongside COVID and the COVID vaccination programmes, practices were also delivering twice as many flu vaccines as well in practice. So I have confidence that we'll be prepared and we'll be agile if things change as we approach those winter months.
Thank you, Steph. That's really helpful. I was just aware that there's always these buzzes going around, and if we can talk about it, and as people are tuning in and listening, we're pre-planning, we're forward planning all of the time. So my question was to make sure that we tell people that. So thank you very much. Any more questions, comments, please? Thank you. I think that was really helpful. Steph, do you want to deliver the next bit from Abby, or shall I just do the real quick update?
Do the quick update. I have a sense people are getting tired of my voice. Never, the call went out.
Absolutely not. I'll let you do it if you wish. No. Okay then. Right, away with you. So I think a while back, Phil met him through one of those gauntlets that down to me, and he put my name aside something, and actually then I turned to my other colleagues that are much better at this than me, and it was around exactly what we were talking about earlier. So it was the stresses that are happening in our primary care networks, and how we're enabling them to to stay well, and especially at a level where we're not able to connect members of staff to properly to an organisation, because they feel that they need confidentiality because of their level in an organisation. So often it's about protecting your integrity, and I guess your sense of self that enables you to do the job that you do. That in mind, and listening to some of the stories from our PCN colleagues shared with us, we had a meeting with Abby Coombs and Helena Noel, and Helena came up with some fabulous ideas on our behalf. One of the really rich things that came out was something called decompression training, which enables people to manage the kind of anxieties that you would imagine, can only imagine actually, goes with the role that people have at director level and at GP level. And so what we've begun to do is to sound out how much that's cost, and we have found out a particular company that delivers what we believe we're looking for. It's quite expensive, but actually in the scheme of things, when you balance that against a person's well-being, it's negligible. It's a sum of £250, sorry, and what we intend to do is test it out. So if we choose, we will speak to one of our primary care network directors, and what we'll get from them is somebody that they believe would benefit from the decompression and training, and get them to feedback whether or not this works, and then we will continue to pursue it. But that's not the end of what we're going to do. So today, I suppose it goes out to any of our GP colleagues that are on the call, or anybody who's listening, if they'd like to become part of the steering group, where we can actually begin to explore where our colleagues can be protected when they not only need help to manage the things that normally people would easily go for, but to protect their confidentiality and their sense of self-esteem. So if there's anybody out there that would like to join this, so today all I'm asking you to do is just to accept the fact that we are progressing with this work at pace, because we believe that that is what it deserved. Any queries, questions, comments, volunteers? Answers on a postcard. Okay, so if, Andrew, lovely.
Hi, Julie. Yeah, I mean, it sounds great, and it fits with some of the LMC wellbeing work. So if you did want to get in touch, or I could put you in touch with colleagues at the LMC who are doing similar stuff. Let me know if that would be useful. You could share ideas and things like that.
That's brilliant.
But thanks for taking it on, and it sounds great.
We just thought it was a necessity, and Tim proved it for us today. Thank you, Tim. And I think it's not the first time that we've had similar conversations, and Phil met and put it really really succinctly. Really, we've heard the voices quiver, and that is not tenable. It's not, it's not what we want. We want people to thrive. So thank you for that. Tim, I'm really disappointed you haven't put your hand up. I just thought you would. Maybe I should have bribed you with some of the gorgeous biscuits that we had this morning.
No, Andrew's comments say what I would have said, but I have full support. I'm sure it'll be very, very appreciated. And I think that it's in every line of work, isn't it? And I think it's important we recognise that everybody needs support.
Absolutely.
At all levels in primary care, and to a certain degree, you know, we can do that with our staff. We all do that with our staff, but you know, I think we all identify in all organisations who looks after the people who are looking after the people, kind of thing. It's that circle, isn't it? It gets very. Absolutely. We're very bad at it sometimes. You know, identifying in ourselves the things we tell others. So any sort of help with that is really valuable.
And sometimes the peer-to-peer support is good, but actually sometimes the peer-to-peer support is actually what we don't need, because we need to walk away with our head held high and our integrity intact, don't we? Yeah. Thank you. Steph, it's back over to you again, please. About the risk register.
Yes, thank you. So we bought the proposal around a subset of our general risk register. So the report is here for your approval and acknowledgement that we've been progressing some of those risks. That you heard Fiona talk about the LD health checks, the learning disabilities health checks. That previously was at a low level, but we've been working with our practices who've responded brilliantly to get those numbers up. There's a couple of new risks there. You'll see that we're starting to acknowledge some of the narrative around access. So I just recommend the report to the committee, and if I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Steph? Any comments? No, thank you. Just a really good report. Thank you, Steph. Thank you very much.
As with most things, it was Mr. Sean Macy who prepared that report for me. So thanks go to him.
We shall note that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated in your absence, Sean. Thank you very much, Steph. David, it's over to you, please. Your NHS report. I think you're still there. Yeah.
I am. I think I've trying to come up. There we go. All right. I'll do it as quick as I can. Am I coming through okay?
You are, yes, thank you.
Great, okay. Right, okay, so the first item in the paper is Primary Medical Group have formally asked to extend their practice boundary by adding Stockton in the Forest to their existing boundary. So it sort of feedback suggests it was included in the former Abbey Medical Group boundary. But for some reason wasn't picked up when the practice merged with Priory back in 2012. So the practice have come forward because they'd like to formally redefine the practice boundary to avoid any confusion moving forward. The boundary extension is illustrated in the maps within the report. I think there's around 200 patients in that area registered with the practice historically from 2012. The local practices and the LMC were consulted on the boundary change. We did receive an objection from Hatchery Group practice, which is included in the report, but no other feedback from other practices or the LMC. So we just need to ask the committee to make a decision if we would support the practice boundary extension in this situation.
Sorry, David.
Hi, David. Sorry you didn't hear from the LMC. That it didn't come to me, so it must have gone to somebody else. But sorry, nobody got back to you about it. I did.
To be fair, it might be that I can clarify. It was maybe that we received no comment rather than a non-response. possible.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I've got two things to say about it. So the first thing I need to say is that I do have to declare an interest at this point because I'm a partner in my health group who would would cover Stockton-on-the-Forest area. So if that could be noted, that would be great. And for that reason, I've to get an LMC collective view, I've taken it to other colleagues as well, so I can present not my opinion on it, but the LMC collective opinion. And we were inclined on this to agree with the objection that has been received from Haxby. We felt that this is coming at quite a strange time. It's quite a long time after the merge, so it's 9 years later, and there is a potential for this to impact on other smaller practices, and we just felt that there was not really a huge demonstrable benefit that had been put forward in the original application, and that any out of area patients could be looked after under, there is a way of doing that. So I think it would be good for, well, this is just LMC opinion, and obviously the committee, I'm not a voting member of the committee, so but I think it should be considered what are the benefits and what are the risks to other practices of this, really, and I would ask the committee just to sort of bear that in mind when making a decision.
I noted that one of the comments was that people could register as out of area, but then I sort of wonder the implications of that should someone need to access a GP quite quickly, and have a house call. I didn't know. I mean, there used to be a point where you wouldn't receive a house call if you were out, you're out of area, would you?
You wouldn't receive a home visit.
Yeah. So that marginalises people somewhat, doesn't it? But any more comments from anyone else, David?
Just a simple question. What's the effect on patients? I'm not quite sure I understand that. Does it mean people will have less choice, or that they'll have a choice to move to somewhere? I'm sorry, I don't understand what the issue really.
So the patients in Stockton in the Forest would then have the choice moving forward to register with Priory as well as the existing practices.
So they can do that at the moment, David?
No, so it seems that the existing patients registered at the practice, and when the practice have done a list cleanse, it's thrown up that these patients are outside of the existing boundary, which doesn't include this area. It's a bit strange. It seems to have been an anomaly that's come up when the practices merged. So the practice would have to look at whether these patients were kept up as out of area patients or asked to register elsewhere. And I think the practice are looking to maintain that continuity for those patients whilst potentially giving the patients in that area choice. But I don't think we'd expect to see patients moving between the practices in this situation.
So those patients at the moment wouldn't get a home visit that are registered with?
No, I think once prior you're sort of reviewing their out of area patients, it might be that those patients wouldn't be eligible for a visit, or they'd be asked to register for another practice. Yeah.
Okay, right. Thanks.
Tim wants to come in, Julie.
Oh, sorry, Tim. You're on mute, Tim. Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have a conflict as well as a GP partner, not affected by this area, but I am the clinical director for the York East PCN, of which My Health is a member practice. And it's not my place to comment on this particular issue, but I do think it does just take the lid off of what is quite a obscure area of primary care, which is practice boundaries. They're not as easy as they should be to find. If you do searches, it's quite hard to find what people's practice areas are. It does limit your search. If you are an out of area patient, you're not entitled to home visits, and you may miss out on some community services, particularly more relevant out our way, where some services are on geography and the practice area might cross those geographies. An example would be mental health services, health visiting, and community services. But if we are moving to a population-based approach to primary care, then this tension between patient choice to register with whichever practice they want to, and providing resilient services on a population. Now, this example may not destabilize a practice, but imagine if one of our bigger practices extended its practice area to, say, cover the town of Elvington. You could argue it would create more competition, but it might actually mean that some of the other patients who are a little further out would lose their, say, surgery in Elvington. That's a hypothetical example. Nothing like that is on the cards, but there is this complex dynamic between practice areas, patient choice, and providing population health, which is by definition on a population basis, not on an organizational basis. So I think, going forward, a primary care committee ought to be cited to practice boundaries and the impacts on patients. I think it's important to look at it from a patient point of view. And this is a very small example of what probably is under the surface in a lot of areas where the boundaries don't quite make sense if you were going to define them today. So good luck, David. It's always a very challenging area of this sort of stuff, practice boundaries. But it was just interesting that this very innocuous change does have some quite complex potential knock-on effects that always need to be cited of and taken into account, I suppose.
I think you're right, Tim. I think historically practice boundaries aren't always that well defined. I've seen various contracts across various CCG areas, and sometimes it's defined as postcodes, or it's just referencing towns. Sometimes it's a hand drawn on a map, and actually if a town
on a map from the
village,
fortress,
a village grows. So no, absolutely, and I think this is probably one of these historic ones where we should have the history, but it's not 100% clear, and we've been advised. Abbey Medical Practice thought it was included, wasn't picked up in the merger, and it is unusual to get an extension request boundary. It's usually the other way.
It's usually the other way around, isn't it? Yeah.
So might I suggest a way forward that we defer a decision, because it feels as if we probably need to make sure that we both reflect the LMC position, but also perhaps go back to Priory with another series of questions that reflect the conversation that we've had here. I don't feel comfortable saying yay or nay at this point in time.
No, me neither. I'm not clear enough about what the benefits and disbenefits to patients are. David's question, which is the critical factor for me.
I think that's what I was getting at is, yes, it's only 200 of Priory patients, but the information, if I was making a decision, I'd want to know how many patients are there in Stockton Forest in that area who could then potentially register with Priory as in-area patients. If that's 50, then, but if that's 600 or 700, now we know they won't all register, but it's that principle of, because that then could destabilize a branch surgery from another practice that relies, it's that knock-on effect, that complex interaction of services. And it probably isn't the case in this case, but it would just be interesting to know in that yellow blob, how many patients are there potentially? And it probably isn't much more than 200. It might only be 600, but we haven't got that information, have we, to make the decision?
Yeah, my reading of this isn't time critical because it's an administrative tidying up. It's not the real world that's thrown this problem up. It's the cleansing of a clinical list. And suddenly thought, oh, that doesn't really work. So we're not compelled to make a decision today, or the world will go flat and a load of patients will fall off the edge of it.
And you do wonder what's been happening in the interim 9 years and what services these people have been given, don't you? So yeah, I'm actually quite pleased we've made a decision to defer and find out more, because we could be opening a can of worms, and we need to make sure that we're seen to be doing the job as we should be doing. So thank you, team. David, you've got a second request as well, the car parking.
So this is Terrington Surgery. and they're looking to expand their practice car park to create more spaces and better access for patients. And development would see the number of spaces increase from 10 to 20. The practice feel this is necessary for a number of reasons. The list size has grown over the last few years and continues to grow. The intention is to use the practice for PCN, additional roles, staff, and they are moving into some void space on the first floor as well. And also the location of the practice means there's relatively little alternate parking close by for a relatively elderly population. So the committee are asked to approve the request for an additional 10 spaces and an increase in the notional rent costs of £2,500 per annum. I see one thumbs up from Phil.
Yeah, yeah, I think we're getting nods. This one makes perfect sense, David. Thank you, I think, to all of us.
And so just one more thing that I didn't put in the paper, just in terms of the COVID vaccination programme. So I've been working quite closely with community pharmacies in the area who have been supporting the vaccination drive. We've got 27 community pharmacies across Humber Coast and Vale supporting vaccinations, 2 of which are in Vale of York. Citywide, Hackney Group have been vaccinating for several months now, and Primary Pharmacy are due to do their first vaccination clinic at the weekend. I want to mention that as well.
That's excellent news. Thank you. Right, any more? No. Thank you. I think we whizzed through that pretty quickly this afternoon. I think we still had quite a full discussion. So thank you, everybody. Yep. July. Our next meeting will be in July, and the sun might be shining completely. I saw your message in the box. You've brought it here as well, so it's shining in the East Riding as well. It'll be 1:30 on the 22nd of July, our next meeting. So look forward to seeing you all. We've got a lot of work to do in between time, all of us. Thank you, everybody, for your input. It's been a really, really good and powerful day's work, I think. So thank you all. For those of you that are joining the next meeting, we're back on Teams. For everybody else, enjoy the sunshine, have a lovely afternoon, enjoy your bank holiday, and thank you so much, each and every one of you, for everything.